Good morning, good day, and good afternoon, podcast listeners. So, we are on to my second podcast with the Building Your Business from the Inside Out with the Power Within Coaching. I'm James Fleming, and today I'm going to be talking to Gordon Teasdale. Gordon is an HR consultant who has a very strong focus on SME businesses, specialising in providing strategic support to those businesses, and I suppose really to help building, engaging their talented employees, and he does that through a multitude of different means. So that's what today's podcast is going to be, and it is also in conjunction with Expat Radio, Dave Hollywood. So without further ado, we are going to kick off to today's podcast, and I hope you find something interesting on the podcast today, and I will start now. Have a good one. Absolutely. That was actually really interesting conversations, particularly around the culture. It's really so important. I've experienced it personally myself, when I was running very large businesses, when you don't get that culture right, and how hard it is actually to change that culture. What do you think, Gordon?
Yeah, I think once a culture is in place, it's very, very difficult to go about changing that, and therefore, being clear from the outset is absolutely vital. And as soon as you start bringing people into the organisation, you've got to make sure that they share your values, and therefore, the kind of culture environment that you would be happy with as a business owner in an SME. That individual is going to be behaving in the way that you would want them to. And when it comes to selecting people, particularly your first couple of employees, it's absolutely critical that you don't compromise at all in terms of the quality of talent, and ensure that you don't make mistakes. I mean, in some ways, it's a bit like falling in love, for want of a better description. It's very easy to see something in someone and to make a commitment, only to find out later that you made the wrong choice, and obviously that brings many penalties along the way if you fall in love with the wrong person. It's a bit like the Buzzcocks song. Have you ever fallen in love with someone you should have fallen in love with? I don't know if you've got that on the playlist, Dave, but yeah.
Very apt, that, isn't it? Hey, I'm just thinking about that myself. I thought, by God, yeah. Been there, done that.
Another thing that seems to come up, when let's say for small businesses, Gordon. So I'm a small business. I've got a couple of employees, but I'm in a growth period. What would you recommend we do first off the bat around recruiting, around, what would you focus on? What would be your number one piece of advice if I was in that growth period?
That really comes down to ensure if you bring people into the organisation, you've got to ensure that you've got a structured process that brings a lot of objectivity into it. So this kind of falling in love thing I was talking about, clearly you want to have a positive working relationship with that individual. You've got to see in them the kind of things that you value, and that you're going to want to retain within the business. But equally, you need to have checks and balances in that process. So it's there's hundreds of recruitment tools out there. Spend a little bit of time looking at them, getting advice, and using the ones that that you feel are the best fit for you, and the purpose you're looking to utilise them in. But I think getting that objectivity into the process, checks and balances, is really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I also think is really, really key is, particularly with the SME market, is sometimes we hire someone, but in actual fact, we don't define what we're really, really looking for enough, because we need to be very flexible. And I think it's a fine line between that. I really need someone to do this, but I also want them to do all these other things.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the key things.
Yeah, and what I want to maybe talk about a little bit later on, but one of the things that I find is really surprising and I fundamentally disagree with is the use of probationary periods. And it happens a lot in SMEs. You bring people in and put them on a probationary period of 3 to 6 months, and then you think it's easy to part company. And that isn't always the case.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to kick off with our very first tune of the podcast today, and we're going to kick off with Paolo Nutini, New Shoes.
Woke up cold one Tuesday, I'm looking tired and feeling quite sick. I felt like there was something missing in my day-to-day life. So I quickly opened the wardrobe, pulled out some jeans and a t-shirt that seemed clean, topped it off with a pair of old shoes that were ripped around the seams. And I thought these shoes just don't suit me. Hey, I put some new shoes on and suddenly everything's right. I said, hey, I put some new shoes on and everybody's smiling. It's so inviting, no short on money but long on time. Slowly strolling in the sweet sunshine, and I'm running late and I don't need an excuse, so I'm wearing my brand new shoes. Woke up late one Thursday, and I'm seeing stars as I'm rubbing my eyes, and I felt like there were 2 days missing as I focused on the time. Then I made my way to the kitchen, but I had to stop from the shock of what I found. A room full of all of my friends, all dancing round and round. And I thought, hello new shoes, bye-bye blues. Hey, I put some new shoes on and suddenly everything is right. I said, hey, I put some new shoes on and everybody's smiling. It's so inviting, no short on money but long on time. Slowly strolling in the sweet sunshine, and I'm running late and I don't need an excuse, so I'm wearing my brand new shoes. Take me wandering through these streets where bright lights and angels meet. Stone to stone they take me on, I'm walking till the break of dawn. Take me wandering through these streets where bright lights and angels meet. Stone to stone they take me on, I'm walking till the break of dawn. Hey, I put some new shoes on and suddenly everything is right. I said, hey, I put some new shoes on and everybody's smiling. It's so inviting, no short on money but long.
Oh, love that song. Bopping away like a nutter here in the studio. I hope the neighbours aren't watching. I think I've been electrocuted on the carpet.
Oh, hey, I put some new shoes on and suddenly.
Yeah, a bit of Paolo Nutini, you can't beat it. New shoes.
Lovely.
New shoes. And on the new, I want to bring Dave in and talk about new employees and how do we develop them, how do we retain them, kind of around that kind of concept, because we talked about employee engagement, we talked about culture, but I want to kind of talk about how do we best retain them that once we've got them hired, and how do we set them up for success. So Gordon, how do we do that?
The key thing for me is to reflect on the information that you actually gathered about that individual during the recruitment process. There's lots of information you become privy to in terms of their values, their beliefs, but most importantly their strengths, and actually setting people up to play to their strengths in the role that you brought them into. I mean, it sounds obvious, but quite often we bring people into a business for a specific purpose, and maybe something changes and you get them to do something else which maybe isn't playing to their natural talents, and as a result they move on. So being clear about the role, giving people focus, and then providing them with recognition around the contribution as well. really the three key things for me. So it's know your people, give them focus, recognise their contribution. Know your people, give them focus, recognise their contribution. If you keep that mantra in your head, then that will actually go a long way to giving you the kind of retention that you need. It's understanding what actually the individual is looking for in terms of the workplace, what their aspirations are, talking to them about that, making sure you're clear in terms of what you expect of them, and then give them feedback when they're doing well, and equally, if maybe things aren't going so well, give them help to get back on track.
It's very true true that, isn't it? I remember that one of the my ex-boss that I worked under when I used to trade mobile phones around the world, he was the best boss that I've ever worked for. And this guy was called Rudd Apsey, and he basically, what he did was, everybody that he brought into the company, because the company he built, the owners of the company lived out in Spain, and he recruited everyone to come into work in this office in Stoke. And everyone that was placed into each position in this company, he sat them down, and he basically, some of the people had never done the job in their lives, but he could see something, he could see the potential in them, and he basically said, you do the job as you see it, and then I'll guide you with the tools that you need. And this guy was just so easy and so under-demanding. When you've got someone over your shoulder putting pressure on you. But this guy, when I was working for him, he actually asked my advice on a lot of stuff with regards to sales and with regards to pitches and to scripts and all this kind of thing, and selling over the phone and all that kind of thing. And he was just the nicest person to work under, that you actually wanted to do well just for him. Not for yourself. You weren't there just to go 9 to 5 and then bugger off and, you got your monthly wage. You were there you wanted to do well, to actually build the business for him, because of the confidence that he had in the people that he brought on board. He was, he obviously saw something in these people, and it became a success. Purely through his foresight.
That's so key to keeping employees, and Gordon had actually mentioned the importance of recognition, of focus, but sometimes, and I think it depends, Gordon, am I correct in saying this? It really depends on the type of person that you have employed, because you have different traits and characteristics, and some people like a lot of information, some people just like an overview. So what's your take on that one?
Well, one of the things, and I've got to say, before I kind of answer that, James, the kind of story that Dave was telling, I mean, that is a great manager, great leader, investing time and getting to know people, and as I said earlier on, leading them one by one. But in terms of, and I don't want to kind of fall into the football Fergie analogy, but I mean, I suppose it's the easiest one to relate to. You bring talent into a big football club, and what you want to do is get people playing to their strengths. If they're a flair player, like a Raheem Sterling or whatever, you're not going to have him playing in the back three or whatever, as a defender bullying the opposition's attackers. It's about setting people up to play to their natural talents. And then in terms of the motivation side of things, again, we know that people will actually respond in different ways to the kind of feedback. So what may be great recognition for one person might be, something which somebody else doesn't value. Being up on stage, getting awards, turns some people on. For some, that they would run a mile away from that kind of thing. So it's about knowing, what the individual, getting inside their heads, understanding really what their motivations are, and ensuring you manage them in a way that keeps them in a place where they're highly engaged.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember I had a boss, David Gordon, and probably one of the best bosses. I'm not even going to say boss. He was a leader. He was a true leader. He was one of those guys that allowed you to make mistakes. And he used to say to me, so when I first got my very first manager job, I'm going to talk nearly 20 years ago, for my very first managerial position, and he was one of those guys, and he used to say, if you're going to come to me with a problem, have at least 2 solutions. let me hear what they are, and then I will help advise you to come up with the right answers. And that guy changed a lot for me, because he did all those things you talked about, Gordon. He allowed you to give focus. He recognised your contribution. He knew what success looked like, and he knew how you were going to get it. And it was just incredible. Having a really good leader, I think, is key. And I think it's for any small business owners or anybody building a business, entrepreneurs, is really to, just when someone does something outside the box, when someone, goes above and beyond, let them know. Give them that pat in the back. Yeah.
Well, that's another way of describing. With regards to a boss like that, it's very much like say a general going into a war, isn't it? There's always going to be one that that's going to think, well, I'm not getting involved in that. I want to stand on the sidelines and I'm going to keep yourself safe. Whereas you get somebody else that'll go, well, I'm one of the team. I'm jumping in here and I'm getting involved and I'm one of the boys. But I'm up there. I'll gain respect by being in there with them and getting involved in it. And then you come away from it and you go, what a great leader.
Yeah.
And that's
one of the other things which we need to recognise as well is that a lot of people don't actually understand what their own strengths and talents are. And again, a great leader, has that insight and will be able to identify, for somebody, did you realise that you're really outstanding when you do this? And actually spending time, talking to people about their strengths, is a really positive thing to consider doing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely key. Now, I've got a question for you, Graham, and obviously, when we're managers, when we're hiring people, when we feel like we've got the right person on board, and our business starts to grow, and we're looking to maximise our performance within our teams, with the people we hire, how do we best do that?
I think it comes back to some of the things we've just been talking about, James. It's really setting them in a place where they've got outcomes which that you're looking for them to achieve in a way that's stretching, but does play to the things that they're naturally good at. Somebody who's maybe highly analytical, a natural introvert, you won't necessarily send them out to be your key client person. It's about ensuring that you're always asking, and it's not about keeping people in a comfort zone. They need to be stretched, but the most productive people are clearly the ones who are playing to their natural talents and setting them targets which they actually find challenging is important. One thing which is I came across a few years ago in terms of how you might want to set goals for people in a way which is stretching them and really adding value to the business is you might have heard of a guy called Ben Zander, who's a renowned conductor and teacher of the cello, but also is an expert in terms of management leadership development. And for his students in the cello classes, he actually asks them at the beginning of the year how they're going to achieve an A. So rather than him actually setting the targets for the coming year, it's actually getting the individual. And typically, people are going to come back with things which maybe are even more stretching than you might have set as a manager. Yeah. So, I suppose to summarise, it is about, again, reflecting on what the individual has as an innate strength, play to that in terms of how you actually challenge them in terms of their contribution to the business.
Yeah, absolutely. Losing a really key employee because you haven't, been correctly engaging them and correctly, managing their performance, and it's absolutely heartbreaking, and I've seen it so many times. And on that note of heartbreak, I would like to introduce my next song, and that's going to be "Don't Go Breaking My Heart" with Elton John and Kiki D.
Morning.
Hey, Davey boy, that was a good song. Do you know? Really, the thing is, see when you lose a key employee, and I felt this. It does feel like your heart's breaking, like Elton and Kiki said. Sometimes you feel you take that really personal because you think, what have I done wrong? What did I not do correctly? So losing a key employee, particularly, by the way, in a small business environment, really can be heartbreaking. So, Gordon, my next question to you, and Dave, obviously you can jump in if you have any stories, is how do we maximise a key employee's performance, but also retain them both physically, emotionally and mentally? How do we do that?
I guess what I need to do is kind of give a little bit of background context to this reply. And over the more than 20 years now, I've been working with the Gallup organisation around their tools, and some of the things that they actually look at focus very much around retention, and they have something called their Q12 survey, and this actually has been generated as a result of research into 27 million employees working in 2.5 million work units, 73 countries, 49 industries. So it's not something that they've actually developed on the back of a cigarette packet. And what they've actually identified is that these key 12 themes, if you focus on those as a manager, as a leader, the likelihood of people remaining with the business and performing exceptionally well is increased. And in summary, what the 12 things are about is actually feeling that your job's important, having clarity around what's expected of you, having the basic materials and equipment that you need to do the job. And we've all been in that situation where you're frustrated by the fact that the IT system isn't working, or you're not in a position to respond to a client response or client need because something isn't available to you. Having the option to do what you do best is every day, playing to strengths. Having somebody at work who cares about you, getting feedback, all of the kind of things that we've talked about, these are critical. But one of the things that tends to happen is that when we're looking at increasing performance, we actually just focus on working harder, either personally working more hours, putting in more hours at the weekend or whatever. But these things are actually counterproductive. So as a manager, you've got a duty of care that you need to recognise with regard to your employees. And part of the being successful as a business and ensuring your people are in a good place and being productive is taking care of people in that holistic way. And it comes back to what you were saying, James, about physical, spiritual, mental and emotional aspects of the individual and the workplace.
Yeah. How would you do that though, Gordon? Now, for example, I am obviously the business that I do. I'm a big, massive believer in having a destination, people understanding their own personal and professional goals. I preach a lot about or talk. I don't know, preach is the right word, but I talk a lot about affirmations, visualizations, understanding what your own drivers are. So how would we do that within our workplace?
Clearly, when we the kind of areas you talked about there, James, it's not just within the workplace. It is a holistic thing. And clearly, there are certain things strategies that an employer can give to people, but it's just about ensuring that that people are taking time out. And one of the things that there's an organisation called the Energy Project, who are based in the US, and I would certainly suggest, if you've got time, that listeners take a look at their website, and they have done a lot of work in these 4 dimensions with regard to well-being, the physical, spiritual, mental, and emotional side of things. And they have actually developed a number of strategies that they would suggest employers look at. Yeah. And I know it's not always easy to do this, but physiologically, our bodies work in terms of cycles with regard to energy, and they've identified, for example, that physical effort, mental effort, if you start to focus on one thing for more than maybe 90 minutes or a couple of hours, your energy is really depleted. So long periods of concentration, physical activity will actually be damaging and less productive. So it's about thinking about, again, the role and how you can set people up to be productive, and just taking care as well as spending time. And it keeps coming back to this theme about knowing your people and understanding when maybe they need some support.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and when I think back to my own personal experience, some of the most professional, most high-performing teams that I've built were around that engagement. So not only having that inside the workplace, but having that outside the workplace. So having, for example, we used to have a social committee where we had gym memberships, where we used to have, I lived in the Middle East for a long, long time. We would have pool parties, so around the pool with barbecues. So we'd really create that inside work and outside work, because we spend a lot of time at work, and being able to keep that, that well-being, both, like we said, physically, spiritually and mentally, going throughout the whole day, really, really key, I felt. And it's something that I know, Dave, that you do a lot on this show, is talk about well-being and spiritual and emotional energy.
Yeah, very much so. There's a lot more people are becoming aware of it, aren't they? Before, it was just a lot more taboo. But now, all of a sudden, everyone's clicking into it, going, well, hold on a minute, this is something that's very, very apparent in everyone's day-to-day lives, and it's something that hasn't been, there was a lot of people always, they knew it was there in the background, in their own lives, but it was like a grey area to go into for people, and they just thought, well, if I come out with something like this, people are going to think I'm potty.
It's well worth considering, Dave, having a look at as I said, the work of the Energy Project, and the kind of areas that they're focused on. In terms of providing these strategies, as I said, it's really beneficial. And for example, emotional energy. In the workplace, it would be certain individuals who will actually trigger you. And you know that any interaction that you're going to have with them could be less than productive, and actually setting yourself up and having a strategy as to how you work with that individual, so that you avoid that kind of potential conflict. It's really, really helpful.
It's amazing how all this stuff, David, and you just mentioned it there about how people are becoming more aware. It's like all of a sudden, it's like a kind of magic. People are now more aware of how they feel, what's working in their head, that whole stress thing. And on that note about a kind of magic, why don't we play a wee tune? It's a Kind of Magic by Queen.
It's a kind of magic. It's a kind of magic. A kind of magic. One dream, one soul, one prize, one golden glance of what should be. It's a kind of magic. One shine of light that shows the way. No mortal man can win this day. It's a kind of magic. The bell that rings inside your mind is charging the doors of time. magic, magic, magic.
There you go, a bit of Queen for you on the All Day Special on Expat Radio. A very good morning to you. If you just joined us, you're listening to the Business Hour with Mr. James Fleming and Mr. Gordon Teasdale, live from the UK this morning. Right, we're back live with the boys.
Yeah, it's a kind of magic. Wonderful, wonderful. And that's what it sometimes feels like, you know, when you get things right. It just feels like they all happen just like magic. But actual fact, it's hard work. You know, being a small business owner, being a business owner in general, you know, that hard graft, that constant, I like to call it falling forward. You know, when things get tough, you just keep moving forward. So that's been a really good hour, a really quick hour. So Gordon, I want to bring you back in here. I want to kind of synopsis and summarize what we've been talking about and hopefully get some real golden nuggets to hand over to the business owners listening today. So if you could give us some golden nuggets before we finish up, what would those be?
There's probably half a dozen, James, if I can maybe go through them reasonably quickly. The first one is I'm conscious of the fact it's a worldwide audience that we've got here. So the first one really is about making sure you've got the basics right and you're compliant within the territory that you're actually operating in. So making sure that your contracts are compliant, making sure your policies and practices are aligned to the legislative area that you're operating in. The next one is be clear about what you actually stand for, your values as a business. And as I said, if you don't go about proactively creating a culture that you're comfortable with, that's aligned with your values, then it will happen by default. So be clear about what you stand for, the culture you're building, and reinforce that through everything that you say and do within the business. So when it comes to communication, keep coming back to the things that you actually stand for when you're communicating with your people. The next one's building the business around the talents and the strength of your people. So you bring people in because of the value they can add, the talents that they have. So build around that and making sure that you optimize the contribution of your people. The next one, be authentic. And this comes back to Dave's story about the mobile phone business. He was dealing with somebody who was really authentic, and he felt that and responded to that in a positive fashion. So be authentic. Karaoke leadership doesn't work. Don't try and be something that you're not. Then have clear metrics in place on an individual and business level so people know how they're doing. And the final one is take time out to celebrate success. We're all ambitious, we're all busy, but it's really important to recognize and celebrate success. So they're the kind of areas I would focus on, James.
Yeah. Now, if let's say someone's really struggling, one of our listeners here today, they just seem to be going through the same, how that hamster wheel we get on with when we have problems. What would you suggest, particularly around kind of HR issues or, employee engagement issues? Is there any one thing that you would really say, where to look, a website, whatever, even yourself? How could people get a hold of you to advise them?
Well, you can get in touch with me. I'm more than happy to have a chat with anyone anywhere in the world. It's gordon.teasdale@hrdept.co.uk. So Dept, DEPT.
Wonderful, wonderful. So before we wrap up, kind of one thing, so for example, is there any place that you would normally put someone? Let's say I'm going through an issue right now and I'm really struggling. locally? Is there anywhere that you would suggest that people would be their first, port of call for issues like this?
I think that, in terms of, struggling a little bit here, James, with the question, because I'm conscious of the fact, as I said, we've got people from around the world. I think, local chambers of commerce are always a good starting point. There'll normally be somebody there from an HR background who you could maybe make contact with.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, Gordon, I want to say thank you very, very, very much for coming on today. It's been an absolute pleasure and absolutely opened my eyes, and I hope that some of the listeners have got some golden nuggets from this today. And I do want to say thank you so much. And you have a wonderful, wonderful day. And Dave.
Yes, sir.
Let's carry on. That was a great chat we had there with Gordon.
Very much so. I'm just the things that Gordon was coming out with there. When you think to yourself, when you're running a business, well, obviously with what we're doing with the radio station, it basically either clarifies what you're thinking in the first place, or you're thinking, I've gone right off the rails here, I need to pull it back. And the two conversations that we've had already with regards to this show is helping me $1 million. So all power to the elbow. That's what I say. Everyone that's coming on board with advice that we've got in the coming weeks, it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love Gordon's, his golden nuggets, his top tips about the compliance, because sometimes we really get it wrong, Dave, don't we? Especially with employees nowadays, and we need to be very, very mindful that a lot of the people that are going to be the workforce of the future is the millennials, and whether we like it or not, they think different. Their expectations are different than us old fogies, Dave.
Yeah, well, the way I see, how I actually see, when you're setting up like you've done with your business and I've done with the radio, you're getting people involved. And my scenario, or my thinking behind it, my vision of how you want things is like, I've based it because I've been brought up around Manchester United through my family and up to, my career when I was a kid. The mentality is that no one is bigger than what you're trying to project and what you're trying to achieve. And in that scenario, I always remember Alex Ferguson having the problem with David Beckham when he first got involved with Posh Spice, and he actually said to him, "There's no one bigger than the club, and if she's going to cause issues with regards to you, then you're gone." And
that's when he hopped with the boot.
Yeah, and that's what. Yeah, and basically what happened. Well, the boot story was he had that happened during the. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about Posh at the time. That was during the game. But the issue was that that Ferguson wouldn't let anyone have this ego that they thought they were bigger than the football club, and that's the scenario of how I run the station and the way that obviously you do your business when you get people on board when you're going out doing your seminars and you got people in there. There's no one with the idea is you don't have an ego. People with an ego, they're only the ones that are creating the ego. Nobody else is thinking they're a superstar. By what you're doing, you create that. How would you describe that aura around you from your actions?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why
there's not a better leader. And I'm so glad you brought that up, Dave, than Sir Alex Ferguson. When I run my workshop, I run leadership development workshops 1 day, 2 day, 3 day. I go into large organisations and I ask a question. And one of the questions I always ask is traits and characteristics of highly successful people.
Yeah.
And guaranteed, particularly up in Scotland, because Sir Alex is a good Scot, is he's always brought up as someone who is a great leader, and that's the traits and characteristics that he shows.
Yeah,
and it's fantastic.
Yeah, well, he's come from a working background, hasn't he? He's come from the ground up. What he's achieved in his life has been amazing, And he wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth, or he didn't come from a rich background. Nothing was like that. He built an empire with Manchester United. Manchester United was the biggest club in the world next to Barcelona and Real Madrid. But he built the club to be this empire now. And the problem is that everybody else that's following him is struggling to actually achieve what he's done, and because they haven't got the same mentality.
Yeah, man, it's the ethics, it's his perspective on success. It's how he ran Man United like it was his personal little empire, his business.
Yeah, exactly, and he instilled that mentality in his players. The players at the club, everybody at the club had that mentality. He'd do things behind the scenes that nobody knew about. It was just little things. There was big things that happened, obviously, that people found out about in the paper and things like that. But just hands-on things that he helped Ronaldo when his father had died and all that kind of carry on, and he helped the other players when they had personal issues with the families. But nobody heard about that. It was all kept within the club. But he reaches out and he speaks to people and he does stuff that nobody comes across. But it's enormous, and he's when you've got someone like that in your friendship circle, that's why he classes it as a family at the club, or he did do when he was running the club. That's the mentality everybody comes out with, but then new people come into the club and it changes, and that's the issue now that United have got.
Think about this, Dave. Think how many young players he brought through that club that went on to be world class. I mean, it's incredible to think that he believed, or he instilled a belief within them. It hits on a lot of points that Gordon actually spoke about. A duty of care for your employees, the well-being and mental health of your employees within the workplace.
Exactly.
Physical and spiritual and emotional energy. He created that and probably didn't really understand, other than he had this inherent work ethic, this inherent empathy, and just desire to be successful, and instilled that in all these players.
Yeah, well, one of the prime examples of that was Paul Scholes, because he was the smallest player at the club when he was a kid, and he had asthma, and he couldn't run. So what the situation was that he was unbelievably talented, but he couldn't sprint. He'd be out of breath, and he had this issue with the asthma. So then they taught him how to control his breathing and how to manipulate his limited talent that he had. But he then became one of the best midfielders the world's ever seen within 15 years, for the last 15, 20 years. And every player that ever played against him has always said, when the question who was the best player you ever played against, they always said Paul Scholes.
Yeah, and it goes back to what Gordon said again. You remember when he mentioned about, be clear what you stand for, your values.
Yeah,
that's exactly what Sir Alex Ferguson done with all those players.
Yeah, exactly, and it's just the lads. I mean, Beckham never had any natural talent. He hasn't got the talent like Ronaldo. He hasn't got the skills or anything. But he had unbelievable ball. The way he controlled the ball. He was able. His passing ability. Those were his strengths. He wasn't an all-round player like Messi or Ronaldo. He had limited ability, but he became, with that limit, he actually, he worked and worked and worked and worked, and through hard work, he became a success. But he wasn't, he wasn't naturally talented, and he's a prime example. Someone that's not a fantastic. When you look at them, you think, "What a brilliant, fantastically gifted player," and all this. But you think, well, when you first saw him when he was a kid, you'd think, well, he's not that. He's not a brilliant runner. He's not got any pace. He hasn't got any tricks up his sleeve, and all of a sudden.
And by the way, you hear that a lot. By the way, about really exceptional football players. Not a lot of them were okay when they were younger, but they kept at it. Somebody installed that belief and that value in them that they could, if they kept working hard and they kept focused, they could be better. And by the way, it's exactly the same for business. So, for example, I think we mentioned this last week. When you get into business for the very first time, everything looks incredibly rosy and it's all going to be easy. And then we start to hit those brick walls and then we don't know how to go over or under or through. So we kind of start to take a step back and we give up. But that's what Sir Alex Ferguson done really, really well. Even when those young players hit barriers, hit the brick wall, he had a way of installing his values and his belief in them. And it was like a Winston Churchill, we will not be defeated, we will never give up.
Yeah.
He had that same mentality with the team.
Yeah, exactly. It was always the 90-minute. If we're 1-0 down or 1-1, they go for the win or they go for the to get the goal, and you knew that it was going to happen. The typical example of that was the Champions League in 1999.
My God! Can you imagine what the players must have felt like?
I remember being in the lounge watching that with my stepfather, and I was in tears when the whistle blew because I just thought, how on earth have we turned that round from the situation we were in? Because I just
Baby, that was like a kid in a candy shop, wasn't it?
Oh, it was just. I've always had self-control. But that night when we won when the final whistle blew, I'm jumping around that lounge like I was just absolutely gone. And I thought, how on earth have we done that?
Sorry, carry on.
No, I was going to say, I just said, how on earth, that when I was watching it, at the end of it, I just thought, how on earth have we got 2 goals in like 2 minutes to win it?
David, it's one of those things that everybody remembers that moment.
Yeah.
Everybody remembers where they were that moment. And like I said, and I'm leading on to my next song with this, it was like a kid in a candy shop. And on that note, we're going to play our next song.
Very good. Quality link.
Robbie Williams, Candy.
Sons and daughters, the bushes
little bit of RB or RW. 11:54, it's the All Day Special on Expat Radio. You're on the Business Hour with Mr. James Fleming. And we had our special guest on this morning, Mr. Gordon Teasdale. We're back live now with Mr. Fleming. Before he's got to go off for his photo shoot this morning. He's applying for the new Bond film in the next. When is it? In 5 years' time, when the next contract's up, you'll be up for it, won't you?
Absolutely, Dave. Absolutely, got another good Scottish accent and James Bond. We're overdue one.
And I think that's what I was thinking. You know, if you got a Scouse Bond or a Geordie Bond.
All right, son. Can he bag a Tudor?
Can you imagine that? Why, well, my name's James Bond, and I'm licensed to kill, like.
Hey, you'll get a shot for. I love the Geordie accent.
Oh, I had to go up there once to deliver a car for Europe Car many moons ago when I was a kid. I had to ask direction at this dealership, and I couldn't understand them. This girl said to me, I asked directions to this girl, and she said, well, you want to go up there, to left, go right, and then she's going through it, and I'm like, you're doing it on purpose. Then I said to the guy, I said, I'm sorry, but I can't understand them. What is it again? And so well, what you want to do is you want to go down the road here, you want to take a left, then a following right, and now, oh my God.
Listen, I've got a Geordie coming on the show, and I think next month. No, tell a lie. December. I've got a Geordie coming on the show, and he's going to be talking about the power of networking.
Really?
He's a big name up in Scotland in terms of networking, and yes, we've got him on the show. And by the way, next week, the show, I have got this incredible guy called Tom Berry for Autolus Digital, and he's going to be talking all things digital marketing. How we get that out there, and he's honestly, I've been working with this guy, I've probably known for over a year now, and he honestly, Dave, this guy is really, really on the ball. And the other beautiful thing, he's been an expat for quite a long time, so he's going to be able to touch on a bit of both worlds. So the local digital marketing, and then when you want to digital market, you're worldwide. So that's going to be a good one next week. So it is
quality. I haven't got a clue what that is, but it'll be good.
He is. He's a very, very clever man. He does a lot of my stuff for me, and does a lot of talks around Scotland around the digital market. So yeah, I'll be a good one for next week. So anyway, so it's time to wrap up the show and get this podcast alive and kicking. So I want to thank everybody that's listened to the podcast today, and I will be on next Wednesday live on Expat Radio doing my next podcast around digital marketing. So hope you all had a wonderful day. I hope you really enjoy listening to my podcast, and please feel free to drop some messages if there's any subjects specifically you would like to talk about, or alternatively, drop me an email at james@thepowerwithin.org.uk. Have a good day.